The Canadian housing market is firmly in correction mode, although there are two cities that are sort of bucking the trend and are still running hot. And we just saw that the Bank of Canada raised its interest rate policy again by 50 basis points to 4.25%. And from what I'm hearing, this is the last raise of the year. But what about going into 2023? Can we expect this raise to rise further? And if you're already feeling stretched out by these rising interest rates, is there any relief on the way? Oh, and by the way, if you are thinking about buying the home for the first time as a first-time home buyer, make sure you make at least $100,000 in your salary. And you want to give yourself about 57 to 60 years of room to save and to pay off that mortgage. That's right, about 60 years. 60 years. According to a new report, you need over a six-figure salary in Canada right now just to be able to afford a home. And this news should not be surprising if you've been following my real estate coverage on this channel. But if you have not been following, then I want you to take a quick second here and hit that like, subscribe, and thanks button on the bottom of this video. That way you'll stay up to date with everything and anything related to our housing market. So going back to this report that was published by Generation Squeeze, very interesting name. Based on our research, it takes about 17 years or so for a young person working full-time to be able to save 20% for that down payment. What's really interesting is that this is actually 12 years longer than compared to the boomer generation, where they only needed about 5 years or so working full-time to save for that same 20% down payment. Not only do you have to save and work full-time for 17 years, but you also need to make a six-figure in salary if you really want to buy a home in Canada right now. According to this very neat and colorful bar graph that they have created, it takes around 27 years to save for a down payment in Ontario and BC. And to be more specific, it's really just the GTA and Metro Vancouver. But overall for the country, for Canada, it takes about 17 years or so. 10 years longer to save for just Metro Vancouver and the GTA, are you kidding me? Let's start to map things up a bit to see how much of our life is required to be able to save and pay off for a home. Let's say you're 18 years old and have just started earning money for the first time in your life from a real job, and you are already thinking about buying a home. I'm assuming you are a very responsible 18-year-old in this situation. So you're 18 years old. It takes 27 years of working full-time to pay for a down payment. That means you are now 45 years old and have finally saved enough money for a 20% down payment. Excellent. And now let's tack on another 30 years for your home amortization period. So just to summarize, you're 18, you work and save until you are 45, and now you have 20% saved for that down payment. Now you have to work and pay off that mortgage for the next 30 years. So now you are 75 years old and now have owned and saved and paid off your home. Finally. It only took about 57 years or so, and you made it. So sticking with this concept that it takes about 57 years to save and own and pay off that home, and I'm assuming you were 18 in this scenario. Well, what if you're a new immigrant that came into the country and you are starting from scratch and you didn't come at 18? What if you came later in life? Well, what if you were born and raised here, but you went through a couple different pathways, maybe changed careers, and are no longer 18 and are now just starting to save and think about going for a home? What happens if you're not starting at 18 and you stick with the same concept? So stick with me here and let's follow through with this thought process. If you start at 18, you finish at 75. If you start at 28, you finish at 85. If you start at 38, that means you're going to finish at 95. The point isn't really to fact check the math. I mean, you could if you really want to, and let me know in the comments down below if I'm off basis, but it's to get a directional view of our housing market based on the activity that we're seeing, based on the prices we're seeing. It takes a real effort to save and pay off a home, especially true in the GTA and the GVA. And that's especially true if you are starting from scratch. That means you don't have the bank of mom and dad helping you out with a windfall. That means you are starting from zero, having to save every single dollar from scratch on your own. Whether you're a new immigrant or you've lived here all your life, it doesn't matter. If you are starting from scratch and saving every single dollar, it's all on you. And it's going to take a monster effort, especially if you want to live in the GTA and the GV, and that's the dose of reality behind these numbers. As a society, are we really okay dedicating 60 years of our lives and saving, paying off a home, making sure it is well maintained, just for the sake of living in the two most populous regions in this country? Is that what it really comes down to? There's a lot more to this country just outside the GTA and GV, and there are a lot more areas outside of Toronto and Vancouver. It just takes an open mindset to see what else is out there. And the reality is, everyone can't just be crammed into these two metropolitan areas. It's just not possible. The report further goes on to say that housing prices are going to fall by an additional $341,000, which is half the 2021 average national value. For a young person to truly be able to afford a home, meaning they can carry on a mortgage that covers 80% of that average price home at current interest rates. Let's take a look at how expensive homes are in Metro Vancouver, the GTA, Ontario, and BC in general compared to the rest of the country. It's mind-boggling. Homes in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, Saskatchewan, PEI, and Nova Scotia have the lowest prices, while Quebec and Alberta fall somewhere in that range. And here's the real kicker. If you are not owning a home, that means you are renting. And as I just talked about in my last video, renting is not an affordable option either. Currently, the national average rent for a 2-bedroom unit has risen to $24,000 a year. That's over $2,000 a month in rent payments. And in some localized area, it's even higher. What do you think is the best course of action for young Canadians today who are trying to save for a home, who make half of what is required from a salary standpoint? What options do they have? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Newsflash, it is still expensive to buy a home in Canada. And yes, the Bank of Canada has raised interest rates, so prices have fallen, but that only really helps if you have a ton of cash saved up, so you need less of a down payment as an entry point. This, of course, does not help your situation on that monthly mortgage payment, which has gone up higher. And as you already may know, that the Bank of Canada recently raised their interest rates by 50 basis points to 4.25%. And of course, the big banks in lockstep also raised their prime lending rates. But here's what's really interesting that came out of that news report, that the Bank of Canada, for the first time in 9 months, has signaled that it's going to pause their interest rate hikes. As I mentioned earlier in the video, prices are going to fall about an additional $341,000 or so for some sense of affordability to come back to the housing market. And with all the interest rate hikes we've seen from the Bank of Canada, and even with the most recent one that was announced, what is the current state of our housing market? Well, according to RBC Economics, the Canadian real estate market is squarely in correction mode. And I can tell you that this downward pressure on pricing will continue as these rising rates are already taking their toll and will continue to take their toll. That is, we're trying to ride out the market right now, hoping conditions will improve in the next 6 months. Well, that plan may not pan out. And how do I know that sellers are waiting on the sidelines? Well, check out this graph. The orange bars represent new listings, and notice the bars are going top down and not bottom up. What this means is that there are fewer home resales and listings compared to last year. The city seeing the sharpest decline in housing prices, well, that list should be no surprise. On that list, you'll see Vancouver, Fraser Valley, Toronto, Hamilton, Ottawa, and Montreal. It's not just sellers who have shifted onto the sidelines either. Buyers have been on the sidelines for a while now. Now there's this really weird dance happening in the marketplace where buyers are no longer actively buying as they continue to see, well, prices fall further because there's a lot of unaffordability right now. And sellers, well, they're hoping to ride out these higher mortgage payments, hoping that maybe prices go up after 6 months or so. Each side is waiting to see who reacts first. Buyers want prices to go down. Sellers want prices to go up. We're in a mix of a very interesting state of things right now. The sheer surge in interest rates and the resulting price drops has materially changed the game for buyers, many who've been on the sidelines for a while now. It's going to take even more price declines to draw these group of buyers in. The demand-supply equation has completely flipped to favor buyers and no longer favor sellers that we saw in the last few years. This is a whole new different market. And my belief is that with each passing month, we're going to see a better buyer's market. If you are a buyer with cash waiting to pounce, just hold on. And you'll see the market get better for you, for your purchasing power. Going into the regional housing markets, first up Toronto. Toronto and its surrounding areas are squarely in correction mode. Home resales in Toronto, they were down 3.8% on a month-over-month basis in November, while the MLS House Price Index dropped 0.8%, marking the 8th straight month of decline. Up next, Vancouver. Vancouver's proportion of home resales fell more than 12% on a seasonally adjusted basis in November and 51% since March. Similar to Toronto, Vancouver also saw its MLS house price index drop for the 8th month in a row, with prices falling month-over-month by 1.5% in the month of November. Vancouver's extreme unaffordability issues continues to put downward pressure on pricing, and as a result, you're seeing now lower activity. Montreal saw its home sales plunge around 8% month-over-month in November. That is the lowest level in almost 13 years. At the same time, the Montreal housing market saw an influx of new listings hit the city, especially in November compared to October, which is definitely helping ease that supply-demand side of the equation. That means Montreal has now faced its 6th month of decline. And if you just look at single-family homes in Montreal, they're down 10% on a year-over-year basis. What's really interesting is that Montreal, compared to Toronto and Vancouver, has always been more affordable compared to those cities, of course. And that level of affordability has just gotten even better with that 10% decline on a year-over-year basis. Now, Calgary, on the other hand, continues to trend the other way compared to the other cities, home resales rising. If you take Calgary and Edmonton, these two specific housing markets are seeing a surge in demand, and they are really benefiting from this inter-provincial migration with buyers who've been priced out of Ontario, with buyers who've been priced out of BC. They're now flocking to Edmonton and Calgary. So does that mean that Calgary is now immune to rising interest rates? Well, not necessarily. Buyers are coming out of Ontario and BC. They have a different level of purchasing power. That means local Calgarians are at a disadvantage with money coming from Toronto and Vancouver, where they have a better purchasing power. So local buyers are still getting impacted by rising interest rates. So what should you expect from the housing market as we go into 2023 and the calendar year changes? The answer is that you can expect this trend of correction to still carry through. And RBC Economics is still signaling that the housing market is still firmly in correction mode, and it's not expected to change anytime soon. But one exception to the statement is, of course, as we just talked about, two oil cities of Calgary and Edmonton. You have the cyclical oil boom, you have relatively affordable housing prices, especially compared to the rest of the country, and compared to Vancouver and Toronto, where these buyers have just been priced out. You have these buyers coming in from Ontario, coming in from Vancouver, who are looking to establish themselves, their career, their families, build out these roots, and that's creating a localized surge in demand in Calgary and Edmonton. And that trend of inter-provincial migration, that low affordability, will continue in 2023 for Calgary and Edmonton. So yes, in the near term, you can expect downward trend in pricing. But if we zoom out, take a look at the macro picture, what does that mean for the long term? The long-term problem when it comes to housing isn't the borrowing cost, isn't inflation. The real long-term problem is, do we have enough housing to sustain Canada's growing population? Especially if the government is targeting to bring in new people every year, we are targeting immigration inflow of 500,000 new people every single year. Do we have enough housing? Do we have the infrastructure in place to build enough housing to sustain that growing population? That is where we should be focusing our efforts. That is where we should be focusing our time and energy to solve the real problem. We've gotten so used to seeing growth after growth, year after year, that people forget that real estate and housing markets are cyclical. They can go up and they can also come down. We just happen to be in that down part right now, and we just haven't hit the bottom just yet. Thank you so much for watching and making it to the tail end of this video. I have exclusive offers for you in the description of this video. You can get some amazing discounts and some amazing sign-up bonuses for products and services that I use on a daily basis. And I want you to check them out and help yourself to some bonuses and discounts. Make sure you've hit that like, subscribe, and thanks button. That's it for now. I'll talk to you in the comments section.